Hi, this is Mark, and welcome to episode 21 of Nerdology, sponsored by CSO, the Cult Fanzine. And my special guests today are Erica from the Verity Podcast and Stephen from Radio Free Skaro. Hi, guys.
Hi there.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm excellent. I'm very happy to be here.
I'm fantastic, and I thank you for inviting us on, Mark.
Well, the pleasure is all mine. I've listened to you guys, well, certainly Stephen, listened to you for years and years, and I've been very much enjoying Erica's podcast as well. So it's a real pleasure to have you guys on. Now, the reason I asked you on to the show is I kind of thought it would be quite cool to focus on something that was quite close to my heart, was movies that you enjoyed when you were a kid. And one that kind of cropped up in conversation between myself and Erica was The Goonies. Now, you haven't seen this film, have you, Stephen? Not prior to recording.
I hadn't until about a week and a half ago, I think, we sat down and watched it. Mm-hmm. At which point, I think I was included in the mix to get my fresh adult take on this children's classic. But of course, I think like a child most of the time anyway, so I very much connected with the film despite seeing it for the first time in my late 30s.
At first you didn't think you were going to, though, because long before we started talking about recording and talking about The Goonies, I had mentioned it as one of the movies that I just loved and Stephen really needed to see, and he was just like, I think it's too late for me. I feel like I'm an adult and it's probably not going to have the same ring for me. And I mentioned that to my dad, and he was incensed. He was like,
dear.
I saw it as an adult. I loved it.
Well, I think I based it on the fact, I remember 10 odd years ago, I was at work and someone had discovered I hadn't seen Top Gun yet. Okay. And he was appalled. This is, we got to watch Top Gun. It's like, the classic film of the 1980s. What was that, 86 or something like that? I think it was. And I watched it, and I just like, oh, what? And I realized that was probably a movie that needed to be seen in 1986.
Yeah, I think that can be the problem. I mean, you look back on these things, and there is a danger of having those sort of rose-tinted glasses when you look back at it. And having that nostalgia factor does allow you to forgive a lot of things, rather like a particular British science fiction show that you may possibly enjoy.
Yeah, I think Goonies is a little different, though, because it is essentially a fantasy tale. And it doesn't... I mean, there are definitely references that are somewhat dated, which are kind of laughable now, but not that much of the film rests on the 80s-ness of it. A lot of it is... I mean, they're talking about piratey times. Like, that was that was old then.
I mean, one thing that strikes me watching this compared to perhaps something that might be made now is the kind of way they approach it. There's quite a lot of dark scenes in the story. I mean, it's got those sort of scary elements which I'm not sure would be in a mainstream kids movie these days. What do you guys think of that?
I think you're probably right, although I haven't watched very many children's movies since I was a kid myself, but I get the impression things are a little bit more whitewashed these days as far as the creep factor goes. However, it makes me think about some of the scarier episodes of Doctor Who these days and people complaining, oh my gosh, this would have scared the crap out of me when I was a kid, but then you go back and watch Goonies and yeah, it is kind of dark. There's skeletons and stuff. Like, this is...
Oh, it's not even that. It's when... I remember watching the scene where the kidnap the villains of the piece, and Ramsey and the other
Joey Pants,
and the other I can't remember the other third guy's name, but where they kidnap Chunk. I was gonna call him Stink. Chunk. I don't know why. I knew it was a 5-letter word ended in K, and they're like physically torturing him and putting his hand in a blender, and I'm thinking, oh my god, this wouldn't get anywhere near a theater these days, Well,
they didn't actually blend his hand.
They didn't, but they were threatening to.
They put in a rubber blade in place of the real one. But the actor still wasn't entirely convinced when he had to put his hand in the blender.
Oh, wow.
Yeep. It's like a children's scene version of the Russian roulette scenes from Deer Hunter, really. I think they actually put an actual bullet in one of the guns. Seriously, I think De Niro says, no, let's put a bullet in one of the guns just to ramp up the intensity as if it wasn't intense already.
Oy vey.
Yeah.
I think something that appealed to me as a kid, I have to be honest, I don't think I was ever really a cool kid. All the characters in this are kind of outsiders or slightly nerdy in their own way, and I think that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I think I said to you, Erica, that it reminded me, my overall impression, if I had to come up with a phrase to describe this movie, is Home Alone meets Raiders of the Lost Ark. Mm-hmm. It's just like, if kids wanted to, it's like a lower level Raiders, Indiana Jones, basically. And it's just a great sense of adventure. And I think any kid who thrived on adventure at that age, rather than just sort of being cool or, listening to the latest hit records and such, and this would have just sung to them. And I watched it I loved this film. It was great. Even I was 38 when I saw it for the first time. But there was just I love pirate ships. There's a big giant pirate ship in there and stuff. And there's, it's just, for some reason I always thought that it was like a supernatural movie.
I don't know why you thought that.
I don't know why either. I just assumed it was for some odd reason. And so, but there was, a great adventurous element to it.
Well, I think
I agree.
Sorry, you carry on, Erica.
I agree about the fact that they are kind of outcasts. They're a ragtag band of misfits who go on an adventure, and that is just speaking my language right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it definitely spoke to me. I mean, Stephen, you mentioned about the whole sort of Indiana Jones kind of mashup there with Home Alone. And Chris Columbus, who directed Home Alone, I think wrote the screenplay for Goonies.
He did too, yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm. And Steven Spielberg produced the Goonies, although from what I hear, he did kind of get involved in the direction in certain points of it. So you've got a bit of a connection there. I mean, Dick Donner at that point was not exactly a stranger to being able to produce a pretty decent movie. He'd done Superman before that, and The Omen, which slightly different type of film.
Just a little. Still involved a kid.
Well, yeah, that's true. And Patrick Troughton.
Mm-hmm.
Naturally.
It's always got to come back to Doctor Who.
Doesn't everything?
Put 3 Doctor Who podcasts in a room, yeah.
So yeah, I kind of thought that one thing that may not translate quite so well today is the way they introduce. You've got the main bad guys, and they've got a sibling who has kind of, how are we going to put this in a PC way? He's got learning difficulties, and they've got him shackled up in a cell, which is pretty dark.
It is.
Again, I'm not sure I could really see that happening in a modern kids movie.
Yeah, you're right. I found there were definitely some sort of PC things that were a little uncomfortable to watch from today's perspective.
Yeah.
Definitely the sloth stuff. And then also just the treatment of Chunk. When he first shows up, they make him do the truffle shuffle before they let him in through the gate. And it's just, it kind of makes me think about the sort of hierarchy of nerds that we have sort of been running into in geek fandom as of late, where some people get stepped on because they don't know all of the production codes, say, for Doctor Who or something. So
who would not know those?
Yeah.
So and this is just, they're all outcasts. I mean, that's kind of the point of the Goonies, and yet Chunk is clearly down a couple of rungs from some of the others.
He's the outcast of the outcasts.
I know. I just feel so bad for him.
I do feel for the underdog, and I think that's probably why I like him as one of my favourite characters from the movie.
I think a lot of people, I could get that a lot of people sort of sympathize him and like him because he's an adorable kid. But yeah, it is, they never let up about the fact that he's heavier than the rest of them. I mean, even when he gets out and his parents greet him, they immediately feed him pizza.
I know.
It's just like, it just shows how not that long ago we were still a fairly insensitive culture. We had gotten over maybe only just recently, perhaps, becoming more racially tolerant, but Sloth and Chunk, who sort of become
they kind of buddy up, don't they?
Because they're relative outcasts. I mean, the treatment of those two characters is just a bit ludicrous. But it's when you watch it, knowing that it came in 1985, you can sort of look back and say, okay, well, it's a time capsule, of how we treated people back then and how far we've come since then.
And you do have to kind of take older films with a grain of salt when it comes to that. I mean, because it was a different world. I know every time I watch Breakfast at Tiffany's, I completely cringe at the scenes with Mr. Yunioshi.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been warned about. I haven't seen that movie either. It's on our list of movies, but yeah, Mickey Rooney and
Yeah.
As an Asian man, that just does not. Oh. But yeah, so this is sort of like a slightly less painful version of that kind of a feeling, and you run into that in old films kind of a lot.
How do you feel the female characters came out of this?
Oh, that was another area. It was just very, very stereotypical, which, I mean, this is an adventure movie made in the 80s. You know, it's a kids' movie. So they are, of course, going to use certain beats throughout the film. And having the sort of damsel in distress kind of a thing that's a thing. I like that there are two main female characters, and I do appreciate that Martha Plimpton's character is a little bit stronger.
She's probably the smartest one of the bunch.
She really is. She's a little bit more stable, I think. But they also have her sort of made up being a little more tomboyish, and that in itself is another sort of stereotype here that it's the tomboyish girl is the one that's strong. Where why can't the more feminine one be the strong one? But that wouldn't have happened in 1985.
Talking about feminine characters being strong, the mother of the bad guys, the Fratellis. Wow, she's a pretty formidable woman.
That is true.
Yeah, it was funny watching her in this because the only thing I'd ever seen her in before was, of course, Throw Mama from the Train. Yes. But yeah, she's an awful brute of a woman too. Yeah.
She really unleashes when she smacks the son around the face. She doesn't hold back.
No, probably not acting. And you were telling me that Carrie Green, who was Andy. She was the big heartthrob of the day.
She was. I have several friends who still have a crush on her in this movie just because they saw her at that age, and were just head over heels.
Well, it's quite a cast there. I mean, you've got likes of Corey Feldman, who was pretty big in the 80s before he had a few issues,
right?
And then Sean Astin. I mean, whatever happened to him?
Yeah. He went to Mordor and was never heard from again.
Yeah. And you had now my memory's cheating.
It was Josh Brolin. Are you?
Yeah.
Which I was astounded when I saw his name. I was like, which one is he? And and lo and behold, there he is. I don't know how old he was. He's probably slightly older than the rest of the cast at the time.
See, to me, he will just always be the older brother from the Goonies. He's
and not a tall George W. Bush or anything like that.
Nothing else that he has done since then, can move that out of my memory. And actually, Sean Astin, even the whole time I was watching the Lord of the Rings trilogy, I was just like, Mikey's going to Mordor.
I mean, other films from that sort of era. You mentioned, Erica, before we were recording that you one of the films you remember quite fondly was The Neverending Story. What was so special about that for you?
I think that there's kind of a running theme amongst the movies that really shaped my childhood the most, and I think they're all sort of escapist adventure excitement type movies, and often featuring characters who are kind of outcasts. I mean, here we have the Goonies; they're a bunch of misfits, and in The Neverending Story, Bastian, the main character who sneaks away to read the book. Stephen has also never seen that movie, so I'll try to keep this fairly spoiler free. But he's also kind of a weird kid who clearly doesn't have friends, and he gets chased by bullies and put in the trash can and stuff. This all happens in the first 10 minutes. I'm not ruining anything for you.
Good.
So I really like the sort of escaping to, be it a fantasy realm like in The Neverending Story or The Wizard of Oz or something like that, or just to an underground cavern with a giant pirate ship that you wouldn't expect to be. I love that kind of stuff.
I mean, films from that time, I don't know, there was something magical about them. It's not that far away from, in terms of years, from the original couple of Indiana Jones films. And as a young kid, I was just kind of getting to the age where I was able to go to the cinema and see these kind of movies, and they were just spellbinding. The whole excitement of going to the cinema. It was just, these are really awesome movies, and it does feel like it was a bit of a golden age But that's just because I'm an old codger looking back at it, and
Could be.
maybe
Well,
I don't know.
I mean, I never saw Neverending Story, of course, but it was a weird time in that mid '80s where, you know, we talked about the darkness of the Goonies. It was just sort of, I mean, Temple of Doom, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom came out in '84, and it was like the first movie that sort of spurred on this PG-13 rating in North America, because it was just slightly too grim and graphic for kids. And even now I watch it, like, you know, it is kind of that and Gremlins at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
It was also '84, and it just it almost like this is like the last few movies of that kind of approach, you know, where kids were put in real peril. I mean, you know, you look at all these kids here. We're watching the movie roll on here. I mean, where are their parents? They're like, you know, they're you know, there's so much that wouldn't pass a censor board these days, let alone that half of them are swearing all the time. And
well, yeah, that's another thing. I mean,
enough.
Yeah, if you watch it many years after having seen it as a kid, somebody was talking about this the other day, and they were saying how they watched Ghostbusters, which again was a similar sort of time frame. And they couldn't believe the amount of swearing in it. They were like, I don't remember this when I watched it originally. So I guess...
Yeah, it seems odd that we've gotten sort of stricter about that rather than loosening up. I guess the religious right has taken more control than I even realized. But no, I actually do quite like the kids swearing and stuff. And they still use that in movies every once in a while these days, but... it doesn't seem to be used in kids' movies as much for the comic effect.
I mean, in a way, it grounds it in reality more, because, you know, if you're in peril and you're thinking you're going to die, you're not exactly going to stand there and say, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And kids do swear. I mean, let's face it. We did when we were kids.
You probably learned
I
it
didn't.
from
I was a good boy.
Goonies.
Yeah, well,
exactly.
good.
Neither did I.
Okay,
I am
fine,
crossing
I
my
didn't either.
fingers as I say that.
But no, that was a good deal of the humor in the film. Watching it now, which I don't think I picked up on as a kid, is probably some of the same things my dad liked at the time when I was watching it as a kid. Just the kids with this sort of semi-adult humor, like breaking the penis off the statue when when it falls over, and then gluing it back on upside down, or talking about turning the house into a sand trap. And Sean Astin says, "And I hope they never get their balls out." Like, just, I didn't understand. I don't think I even knew what a sand trap was actually at that point. So I didn't. That whole joke went over my head. But now watching it, I'm just snickering.
And the whole thing with the Spanish maid, I thought that was really funny.
Yes,
And quite ironic when you think of what happened to Corey Feldman later.
Oh yes,
Poor guy.
there's a little extra weirdness there. That's funny.
I mean, around that same sort of time, you had the likes of Back to the Future. That was a real breakthrough movie, I felt. And again, you had a
that was
similar
another
sort
one.
of... It was aimed at a similar sort of age group, and you had those similar sort of things cropping up, like the sort of language and things like that. But, I mean, that was a great movie.
I actually remember seeing that in the theater.
I do too.
None of these, most of these other ones, I think we discovered after the fact because we rented a lot of movies on VHS back in the day. But my parents are big sci-fi geeks. That's how I started watching Doctor Who, and of course, anything having to do with time travel was like, yes, it's a family movie. Let's go see it. So we went and saw all 3 of the Back to the Future movies in the theater, I think.
I think we certainly saw the first one. I can't remember why. It was a family event, actually. We all went, and that was kind of rare in itself. Maybe because I liked the car so much. And I was a big fan of the Dukes of Hazzard and Knight Rider and any other shows that had cars, and I just assumed that perhaps this DeLorean was some crazy time crime-solving vehicle or something like that. But yeah, that was a bit of a formative one for me. Most of my formative movies were the basic ones, like Star Wars. Like that was pretty much it. Star Wars and Doctor Who pretty much ruled my life from age 8 to 18. I didn't really delve into that much else.
I have vivid memories of Star Wars. My brother's 4 years older than me, and back in '77, I would have been 4. So I was deemed too young to go and see it. And I was very upset because my brother was older than me and he got to go and see it. So that definitely...
I saw it in utero. My mom was pregnant with me when Star Wars came out. I came out just after Star Wars did. And so I experienced it. that way for the first time. And I don't actually remember when I saw it again. It was just one of those things that was around because my parents were such geeks that...
Well, actually, it worked out in my favour in the end because a few years later when they brought out The Empire Strikes Back, I was just that little bit older. And back in the olden days, I don't think they really do it these days, certainly not in the UK, you'd have a double bill.
No,
so I got to see Star Wars
nice.
and Empire Strikes Back to back, which was pretty cool.
Reminds me of the night before I saw Return of the Jedi, which is the first film I saw in the theater. And the night before, there's a double feature of Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. And I, to this day, regret not going to that. Because I watched... there's a free movie channel that launched in February of '83 here in Canada, and it wasn't free; it was pay TV. But the first month was free as a sort of an introductory offer to try to sell the product. And they actually cut a deal with Lucasfilm that they had to show Star Wars 3 times a day for a whole month.
Wow.
And so I would go over to my friend's place and just play Star Wars toys, not really knowing what I was playing with, and just looping Star Wars on this channel just over and over. And I can't remember the first time I actually saw the movie from front to back. I would just see bits and bits and come back. And so I saw Star Wars and based on that I wanted to see Return of the Jedi. And I didn't see Empire Strikes Back until VHS in 1986.
Wow.
And all because I didn't go to that double feature in 1983.
Well, how much control did you have over your life in 1983
I
to
was
be able
8.
to go?
I was 8 but I would have stamped my fist and feet, and I was going to Return the Jedi the next night. I don't know why I didn't lobby to go to the one before.
I mean, Star Wars, I think because of probably our sort of age group, it is kind of like in your DNA. It's just always been there. And I'm not sure Return of the Jedi stands up as necessarily the best of the original 3. But
Nope.
I think, that even before Mr. Lucas decided to go back and revisit and tweak and add in digital effects and stuff, they still look really good now.
Yeah, and I have a hard time. I look at Return of the Jedi, and there's some clunky elements to it, I suppose. But because it was my Star Wars movie, so to speak, I look at that so fondly. And I think it made me more interested in space stuff than perhaps Earthbound stuff. Like I never saw Raiders of the Lost Ark, any of them, till college.
Wow.
And so Goonies just was sort of something that flew over me. Like I was more drawn to The Last Starfighter.
Yeah.
Something like that, and other space-tastic movies and TV shows at the time. So Goonies just never was a thing for me as a kid. I think I knew people who might have seen it and mentioned it, but it was just sort of outside my circle of just watching another scene from this film. Oh, Chunk! What a shame that kid's not acting anymore, because it really is a tremendous.
I think he's a lawyer now.
He is,
Really?
according to
That's right.
Wikipedia or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I watched they have a commentary track on the DVD. And
Yes, I wanted to watch it. I haven't seen it for years. So I need to.
It's
watch
really
it
good because
again.
it's a video and they just kind of bring them up on full screen every now and again, and it's kind of cool to see them all now as adults. So that's kind of entertaining.
The one thing I remember from either from that or from some interview or something like that was just talking about the direction during the film. The director was always saying, big eyes, like telling them to open their eyes wider to make it seem more excited and scared. And going back and watching it with that in mind, it's like, oh yeah, you can see they are like.
It must have been a nightmare trying to control all those children on set.
Oh,
I'm sure
I can't even imagine.
That's the thing that's really stuck out at me is that the movie's a very loud movie, and that there's a lot of things happening at the same time. It's directed a lot different than a kids movie would today. It's all like 4 or 5 kids in one shot, and they're all just doing their own thing for the most part. But it's such a natural way of doing it. I mean, the whole movie feels like actual kids actually talking to each other. It doesn't feel like they're reading off a script or anything like that. There's a great scene where Sean Astin goes on.
Oh, at the beginning in the attic?
Yeah, in the attic for about a minute.
Yes, when he's talking about the one-eyed Willie and how his dad explained it to him and everything. And when we were watching this, I told Stephen right afterwards that scene totally resonated for me, because that is the way that my brother used to talk when he was little. He would just get so excited about something. He would just talk and talk and talk and talk and forget to breathe. And like at the end of it would just be super out of breath. And he was so excited. And it was that was spot on. There were some really good performances here, and his other big speech when they're in the wishing well, underneath and trying to decide whether to go on or not. His speech about this is our time down here, it's their time up there. That speech just gets me every time. And I've always said that someday I want to start a pop punk band and call it Troy's Bucket. Not too many people will get it, but those that do will be
You heard
really
it here
excited.
first, folks.
I think, and I don't know if that's a testament to the actors or to Richard Donner directing it, like how that was, the amateur film critic in me comes out when I watch movies like this, because I like to analyze how they're made and how differently they're made today, and I just I wonder how many takes were done for these, or how much coaxing and directing before the cameras rolled, where because it is one of the most natural series of kids performances I think I've ever seen, and it's really great to see.
And also, I think it must be quite a stressful thing for a kid of that age to, have effectively a starring role in a massive budget movie. It must be a lot of pressure. And I think I remember Sean Astin saying that he was advised by Dick Donner to go and just take a break from the set and just go off and just completely chill out and just relax and then come back when he's ready. And he said it kind of worked in reverse, because all I could think of was all the other actors standing on set waiting for me to come back.
Oh no.
Poor guy.
I think he kept Corey Feldman in check by promising him that Michael Jackson would turn up on the set. And he did.
Did he
my
really?
goodness.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
So
How did he swing that?
Yeah, I think he was friendly with Spielberg,
Oh, okay.
and Corey Feldman had been pestering them to get Michael Jackson to the set.
And given Michael Jackson, his Neverland Ranch, the whole he liked kid type stuff. Without, I'm not going there. I'm just saying that he was very interested in sort of the childlike wonder type stuff.
Yeah.
It seems like The Goonies would be a movie that would have been
Right after
exciting, just from a plot and set standpoint.
It sounded like a pretty regular thing by the end, because they had pretty much the whole Jackson family over there. And they had them watching them filming the. Do you remember the scene where they've got the piano keyboard that's made out of bones?
So, that one, yeah.
Yeah. Apparently that was quite a scary set to be on, because it's about 40 feet up in the air. Wow. And they had all the cameras underneath sort of shooting them from below. So, if you take a bit of a tumble and fall off that, you're not going to come off too well.
Eep.
Especially when you're little as well.
Yeah, that's the great thing about older films that I just love. Predates CG, obviously. So, that pirate ship you're seeing is a
full size, yeah.
pirate ship, and there's no wires that you can paint out later on. There's just a certain realism to it all that just makes it that more intense. Yeah, I remember that scene with the floor giving out, and just thinking, yikes! Like this looks like some really rubber filmmaking. It's.
I yearn for the days of practical effects. I just think it's that was another fun thing about going back and watching this. If they made this movie now, it would be all CG, and that would it would just lose so much of the excitement and the heart, I think.
It would, and I mean, there's Sloth's makeup, which are intrigued, but his ears go. I think his ears move. Which I always thought, perhaps that's why I thought he was alien or something like this. And this might have cemented the fact that I thought this was like some space movie when I was a kid. Because, our ears don't move.
Well, some people can move their ears a little bit.
But they sort of, his sort of like twitches almost
That's
like
true.
Jabba the Hutt's tail in a way. It just sort of has this.
That's true.
Yeah, which I thought was kind of weird. But it's almost like they're moving it to show that they could move it in a way. It's like, look what we can do with animatronics. We can move his
Of course,
ear.
you had all the gadgets as well that Data.
Oh right, yeah.
With. They were fun. And how much fun must it have been to go down those water chutes?
I always wished that there was a Goonies ride.
Oh yeah.
Someplace, because they have the Pirates of the Caribbean and all that. They rides. Actually, that was a ride first before it was a movie. But I just thought this would have been such a fun experience, one to wander around in and go down a water slide and stuff.
But they never did. Missed opportunities, that.
Or if they did, I didn't know about it.
Yeah.
I love that the map is written in Spanish, and when it's translated into English, it rhymes in English, but not Spanish.
As if it was
those-
intended.
It's one of those just it's ridiculous and the kind of nitpicky thing that usually bothers me, but it's a kids movie and they're just trying to make it so cute and adorable.
Right.
It warms the cockles of my heart.
Well, I will question one thing at this. Why is it set in Astoria, Oregon, which is in the Pacific Northwest, somewhere where pirate ships have no business being? That's what I always thought so odd about it when I was watching it. It's like, is this really Astoria? It looks like the Northwest. Is this maybe in Texas or something? You know, somewhere near the Caribbean? No, it's not. But whatever. Niggling little details.
I think those like nitpicks there are actually just make it funnier and weirder. Like it's just sort of it's that much more surreal. I love the soundtrack.
Oh yeah.
The Cyndi Lauper song, "Goonies Are Good Enough," is so cute. It's just such a
It's very much of the time, isn't it?
Yes, 80s song, and it just fits the excitement of the movie. It's fun adventure. We're off on an adventure kind of a song.
And they filmed a video as well with WWF wrestlers. Not entirely sure quite where they fit in, but
I think
remember.
Captain Lou Albano and the guy with the rubber bands on his face.
That's him.
Yeah, he had a connection for some reason with Cyndi Lauper because he played her
He
dad
was in the
the
Girls
video.
Just Want to Have Fun video.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't remember the video very well. I just remember the excitement of the movie, and then just the soundtrack or the score actually is pretty good. It's got what I like to refer to as sparkly sounds, which are those kind of like twinkly sort of synthesizer sounds, which you hear in movies like that and in Labyrinth and a lot of the sort of kids movies of the time. That kind of stuff goes straight to my heart, and it's an immediate sense of wonderment when I hear that particular kind of sound.
I mean, there is talk of a Goonies sequel.
Yeah, they've been talking about it for so many years, though. I've
Yeah.
kind of given up at this point. But that would be so wonderful. I don't even care how bad it is. I just want to see it.
Like to have the original cast meet up again or something, or
That was what they were talking about.
I don't know how that would work.
At
I mean,
some point.
maybe you'd have to have their kids or something going off on an adventure, or I don't know.
think when they first had talked about it, it was sort of when they were all kind of more in their prime, so to speak. Now everybody's they're getting maybe a little old for the adventure kind of thing. I think it might have actually worked to have them doing an adventure when they were all, say, in their 20s or something like that. But at this point, I don't know. I'd still watch it, though. Hey, why can't grown-ups have an adventure like that?
well, I think it would probably turn into be. I said Home Alone meets Raiders of the Lost Ark. It'd be like Old Dogs meeting Raiders of the Lost Ark.
I don't know what that is.
The John Travolta,
Oh,
Robin
yeah.
Williams,
motorbike
he lost me.
motorbike gang. But yeah,
Okay, that passed me by completely.
it
I'm
sounds terrible,
okay
but
with it.
believe it or not, it was a hit with older crowds.
or the
So,
Expendables.
or the Expendables, that kind of thing.
I don't know what that is either.
That's all those. That's
That's
the
a lot of
recent
old
movies.
80s kind of
Oh,
action
right,
heroes all
right.
getting their Zimmer frames out and blowing stuff up.
Gotcha.
There you go. Yeah, it's kind of like if action movie people did an 11 Doctors special or something for the 50th anniversary. That kind of thing.
I see.
Yeah. No, I think, I mean, as I said, I've only seen it the one time, but I think the reason that so many people look at Goonies as being such a landmark of their childhood is that there was only the one.
Yeah.
And there was always that desire for more, and the fact that they never made another one is probably why it stands up so well. You know, everyone talks about maybe Gremlins or something, but no one ever seems to talk about Gremlins 2, from
No,
what I
that's true.
understand.
Although
You know,
that's
they
being
never made that
remade again
mistake.
now, apparently.
Is it really?
Really? Oh dear.
But they haven't remade Goonies. In a way, that's almost surprising.
Good.
Yeah.
I hope they don't. I really hope they don't. I want it to just stand on its own.
It's kind of like the movie equivalent of Terror of the Zygons. Well, until now, because now they're going to bring them back again.
Right.
Not entirely sure about that.
Right.
I get the suspicion that because they announced it so early, that I think that's maybe a red herring and they're not going to be a major part in it. That perhaps they're... Obviously, it will cost them a bit for the costumes, but I think they'll probably come back in season 8, and they're just going to make like a little cameo in the 50th. I could be wrong.
I do hope you're right. That does sound like something they would do.
Yeah, I think I bet you David Tennant probably said, "Okay, I'll come back on one condition. I want Zygons."
Throwing him a bone.
Yeah.
Well, I can't believe we've been on this recording so far, and we've not even mentioned the fact that Matt Smith is going to be leaving Doctor Who.
I know. How did we go so long?
We've held off this long.
Well, we've held off this long. I've already talked about it on Radio Free Scarlet this morning.
Okay.
Eric will be talking about it later today on Verity. So
That's true. Although, honestly, I am an old school Doctor Who fan. I've been through this a lot of times,
Yeah.
so I don't really have any strong emotions one way or the other about it. My gut reaction when I saw that was actually excitement, which surprised me because I adore Matt Smith. I love him so much. Tom Baker, I think, will always be my Doctor because
Yeah,
that's
me too.
the one I grew up with. But boy, oh boy, Matt Smith comes real close to supplanting him, and I love him so much. But I was still really excited about the thought of getting a new Doctor,
Yeah.
because that's the nature of the show. It changes, and I think that's wonderful. And I didn't think that I would like the new guy any better than David Tennant, and then here's Matt Smith to prove me wrong. So who knows? Maybe whoever they get next will be someone I fall in love with even more than I did Matt Smith. Anything's possible. And if not, well, I'll wait a few years and see who
Somebody
comes
else will
next.
come along, yeah. I think he did the right... Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say, I think he did the right thing in bowing out while he was still popular, whereas I do feel that David Tennant slightly outstayed his welcome. He was on a real high by the end of season 4, and then you had that whole series of specials, in inverted commas.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it felt to me like it was just being dragged out, and it lost a little bit of the shine for me.
There's something to be said for going out on a high note, and I think that that's exactly what Matt Smith is doing, because I have been super excited about Series 7B. I've loved it so much, and I think it's a very strong way to go out. I know everybody doesn't agree with me, but every Doctor is somebody's favorite Doctor. Every episode is somebody's favorite episode. So
I've enjoyed the variety this year. I think it's... I know some friends of mine tend to prefer a sort of a more structured continuity and a more of a theme throughout. I know you've had the sort of the references to the old series and what have you, but I think it's nice to have these more standalone episodes rather than necessarily having to have an arc, 'cause it gives you a little bit more variety when you're watching.
Yeah, I think so. And it depends on the quality. I think there's one or two that I didn't quite like at this past half series. And oddly enough, I think probably Nightmare in Silver is when Matt Smith didn't quite hit the mark.
That's how I feel.
Probably for the first time as the Doctor. Then he brings it right. But even like at that point, it's like, maybe I'm not... I don't want to see him go, but I'm just thinking like maybe he's reached the end of what he can potentially do. But then he provided just probably one of his best performances in The Name of the Doctor the next week.
Yeah.
And so I think I was struck by sad resignation that this is what happens in Doctor Who, is that doctors leave, and it's just hard to believe that it's been, 3 years, 4 years, I guess, if you look at it, 4 calendar years, and almost 5 by the time he leaves. When he was announced in January of 2009, and we had to wait a whole year to actually finally see him in the role. So it was just a momentous build-up, and depending on who the new guy or girl will be, like that actor will be announced in, I think, August or September or something like that, and we won't see that person for another year, because it looks like Series 8 will come in the fall of 2014. So it'll be it's strange. I was saying to Warren on the podcast today is that we've Radio Free Scarlet has been going for almost 7 years now, and we've David Tennant was the only Doctor we knew, and then Matt Smith came along, and now his entire tenure has existed within the confines of Radio Free Scarlet's timeline, and it just feels weird to be talking about a new Doctor again, when as a kid growing up, for us, and taking it back to movies and television series of our childhood, a kid growing up here in North America, every Saturday night was Doctor Who, and so you would just loop around, and the Colin Baker era was 11 weeks in the summer of 1989 for me, and then it was Sylvester McCoy for another 12 weeks. Yeah, many people will could go back. So it's weird to sort of have a Doctor in real time, and it doesn't feel like it's enough for some reason because he hasn't been on the screen 12 months a year, and so
I think it says a lot about his contribution that it's really hard to we've got one example there with Nightmare in Silver what you could pick at, but he's been so consistently good right the way across the board, even if the stories aren't always as good as we'd hope them to be. He's always on the ball. He really knows how to deliver a really great performance.
Yeah, and he's constantly surprised me.
Yeah.
He doesn't... He just does the unexpected, which I like. That's what kept his performance fresh every single week, is that you just wondered what he was going to do. And right from the get-go, I remember him like doing stuff in the background in the 11th Hour and Time of Angels, like his first stories that he actually recorded, and he's just doing these weird stuff in the background just to show that he's still there, and sort of like holding books up to his ear and stuff, like just these weird natural eccentricities that only Tom Baker had really before him. It'll be weird because you obviously can't go in that same path as Matt Smith. You have to go different.
Yeah.
So
there's lots of speculation. I mean,
none
names
at all. I can't
keep
imagine.
Coming out. I know, it's ridiculous. I think it'll be another person who's relatively unknown.
I hope so.
I think
Actually,
that's the
one
way
thing
they
I
tend
wanted to
work.
say about Matt Smith's quirkiness and sort of him putting himself into the character is a good thing, and I think it's worked out really well most of the time. But I feel like maybe we're crossing into territory around now that it's starting to make me a little bit squeamish. And I don't know how much truth there is to this, but have heard people say that some of the random kisses that we have seen in this last series or two have been not so much in the script, but just Matt Smith, one of his random things that he improvises. And I am not liking that at all. And not just from I prefer an asexual doctor sort of a stance, which that is how I feel, but it doesn't, I don't know, it just seems kind of weird, and it doesn't quite resonate with the way that I feel like he's been playing the character most of the way along. So I wonder if maybe we're getting to the point where he's just feeling so comfortable he's putting too much of himself into it, and maybe this is an extra good time for him to move along.
Or maybe, for any actor, I'm sure he's very happy to be working, but any actor who stays in the same role for quite a decent length of time, no matter how good you are, you're probably going to start to get bored. And maybe that's just a sign of that. Maybe, I don't know.
That could be. Yeah, as I said on Verity, I think last week, I just don't want to see... thinking he was going to be back for Series 8, I just didn't want to see him come back with a cabbage on his shoulder as a companion.
So we've stopped him just before Tom Baker's recent, later excesses in the Graham Williams era took fruit, is what you're saying.
Although I do have to admit that that's kind of my favorite Tom Baker era, but still, I don't know that would necessarily translate.
Yeah, it'd be weird. It'd be weird to have a modern day Douglas Adams, Graham Williams era in Doctor Who.
What do you think of the timing as well?
I don't think I'd go for it.
What do you think of the timing as well? Because Stephen Moffat eventually at some point will move on. So does this mean that he's going to be staying for a few more seasons yet if he's going to be introducing a new lead actor?
Well, he's staying on certainly for Series 8, but it does give you that impression. It's rare for in this day and age anyway, for a outgoing producer to cast a doctor for someone else to write for.
Unless that's already been chosen. Maybe they're changing everything.
Yeah, like it has like Barry Letts did it. Gave Philip Hinchcliffe the best gift he could ever give by casting Tom Baker as he walked out the door.
You can imagine anyone coming in fresh as a new producer is going to want their own guy or girl.
Yeah, so I don't know if Moffat is going to write Series 8 and leave at the end and sort of shepherd in a new executive producer, showrunner to take over after him.
So do a Barry Letts where he kind of shadows the new guy.
Yeah, kind of. Or he stays on for longer, like for 2 or 3 years or something, and or perhaps 2 years at least, and allows maybe for someone to sort of spring up. Yeah, I really like this new guy. I'd like to take the 12th Doctor into for the next few years. Who knows? I mean, obviously everyone's going to speculate it's going to be Mark Gatiss as the next showrunner. That's been mooted about since about 2007, I think.
I'm just excited to see Series 8. I really like the idea of seeing Moffat do a different Doctor and see what he does with that. I want to know. And honestly, I would have been happy had it been the other way around too. If Matt Smith had been staying and Stephen Moffat had decided to move on and we got a different showrunner, I really like the idea of shaking things up a little bit and doing different pairings. I'm sure that there is a parallel universe out there that's very close to our own where it's the opposite that's happening, and I want to go visit and see what happens.
I think there is a fairly vocal minority who aren't very keen on Stephen Moffat's production style or writing style, what have you. But I think he's done a really decent job of holding it together. But I do agree there's probably a finite time span where someone even as good as him can start to sort of not necessarily run out of ideas, but start sort of retreading the same ground again.
He does have a tendency to reach back into that same sort of bag of tricks. He's, as I have been known to say before, he's kind of a little bit like the Taco Bell of Doctor Who. It's the same 7 ingredients, but, mixed up and put out in different ways. And I love Taco Bell. I think it's all delicious. So that is in no way an insult. I think it's fantastic. Oh, but yeah, eventually
I know we're going for lunch today.
Yeah. Can we?
Yeah, okay.
But I think you're right, though. After a certain point in time, he might be tired at this point already, and maybe he is just sticking around and hopefully shepherding in someone new. But what a thankless job that is. I mean, that position is just, even the people who love you complain about you all the time.
I mean,
having read, there are the people who hate. Yep.
Having read Russell T Davies's book, his kind of diary of his time in charge of the show, it does look like the job from hell in one respect, because there's so much to it. But he wasn't running another show alongside it. I mean, Stephen Moffat's got Sherlock. Admittedly, he splits the duties with Mark Gatiss, but it must be a hell of a lot of work.
I would be super, super burned out by this point, I think. I don't know how he does it.
Well, I think what might keep it fresh, I mean, what RTD's era, when he was doing the regular series, it was always, much to Ian Levine's delight, 13 episodes and a Christmas special. That was the established format.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was necessarily how much these split seasons and other things are Moffat's idea, or if it's just the BBC's. But I think the different approach, I mean, Series 5 was Moffat's first, and that was the only, that sort of followed right on from the RTD model of 13 episodes in a year. Then we had a split season over the course of one calendar year, and then this one was split up over a few months. And now in the next one, who knows what it's going to be like. So there's always been a different approach to how you deal with the stories. And, a 13 episode series, you almost have to kind of have a running arc that people remember week after week after week. But with like 5 in September and 8 more in May, you can sort of split up into the little mini things, and maybe that sort of helps him.
Yeah, I guess it takes some of the pressure off.
You might be right. And I have heard from a fairly reliable source that it was actually, that's Moffat's choice, not the BBC's choice.
Is it really?
So.
Okay.
I always figured there might have been some sort of monetary thing going on there as well, with sort of budgets being spread over 2 years rather than over 1 year or something like that.
The person I talked to sort of poo-pooed that idea, so I don't know. But then again, you never know.
So, apart from forcing poor Stephen to watch The Goonies, is there anything else that you could recommend to our listeners that you've enjoyed recently?
Actually, yes. I have been spending the last few weeks here in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, with Stephen, and I've started doing something I never thought I would. I had made him watch The Goonies, yes, but he convinced me to start playing Lego Batman, the video game.
Cool.
And I'm not a huge gamer of that ilk. I like RPGs of the more sort of character-based sort of thing. Not, anything that requires skill is usually beyond me. So, but I've been watching him play for days and days and days on end. And finally I was like, okay, fine. I will try playing with you. And I found I really, really like it. It's just a fun thing to do together. So if you were like me and were sort of turning up your nose at the Lego style games, I recommend finding someone to play with and trying it out. Because I can't imagine playing it by myself. I feel like at this point that would seem really lonely since I've only done it along with Stephen. But it's really fun.
Stephen, I had no idea that you're interested in Lego.
I know, it's astounding. It's a well kept secret. So
Yes.
I thought, yeah. No, it's been fun. And you said, Erica, that you wouldn't have felt this way about like Lego Lord of the Rings.
No, I did try playing Lego Lord of the Rings. Was it last August when I was visiting?
No, it was December.
December, yes. And I couldn't get into it, and I think that's because I had such an investment emotionally in the characters. Because Lord of the Rings is one of my favorite things of all time. I used to read the entire trilogy and The Hobbit every single year for about 12 years in a row.
That's hardcore.
As I was growing up. Yeah. So I had trouble with the movies because they weren't like the books is not enough for me, and I'm a purist and all that. So the Lego games were even farther removed, and I had a little trouble. I just couldn't get into it. But Batman, I enjoy comic books, but I've never really liked the superhero comic books all that much. I know enough about them to get some of the inside jokes.
Yeah.
But
They do have a sort of
an
tongue-in-cheek
emotional
humour, don't they, the Lego games?
Yeah, and I don't want tongue-in-cheek humor with Lord of the Rings. Like, that's not okay. That's serious. That is serious stuff, guys. That's history.
You
it
may be
happened.
disgusted to learn this, but I used to read Lord of the Rings every Christmas when I was a teenager. I've got the sort of the hardback edition with them, all three books together. And the only way I could get through it was to skip past all the bits where they break into song or go into poem, because that would just drive me round the twist.
I admit that I did kind of skim those bits
Okay.
sometimes. I still read every word. I just read them really fast until I got back to the pages and pages of description, which is what I was really excited about.
I think he writes in quite an unusual way, because he's got this, it's almost like a script for a film. You've got these sort of various narratives going on, and he likes to split them up. So you start investing into the characters that are running along one storyline, and just as you get to a pivotal point, he pushes you in a totally different direction and follows another strand of the story, and I think it works really well.
I love books like that.
So Stephen, any recommendations for you?
Well, I like. I'm having a blast with Lego Batman. I've played the game before, and so, but it was a couple years ago, perhaps. And now we're playing on an Xbox, and it probably once we stop recording on this, we'll probably go and purchase Lego Batman 2, which I've never played before, and that'll be our game. But other things that we've been doing since Erica's been here is that we have a list of shows and movies that we each want the other to watch.
It's a very important part of any marriage.
Of course,
to
of course.
Naturally.
Indoctrinate the other to their media.
Goonies was one of the movies on the list, and most of mine are TV series because I like TV shows more than movies, and we've just sort of started to scratch the surface a little bit. I watched an episode of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy
awesome.
with her.
Not awesome.
Didn't quite sit as well with her as I would have hoped. But I'm holding out hope. We watched 2 episodes so far of The Tripods, which, when I think about it, is the television version of my Goonies, really, because that was, I watched that in my mid-teens, I think, and I was just caught up in it so much that it holds so many wonderful memories watching that show, and I've I barely, for a while I didn't even have the series apart from some awful VHS recordings, and of course it came out on DVD a couple of years ago. So
because of the timey-wimey way these things work, I would have watched that when I was probably 10 or 11 or something like that, because it probably didn't make it over to you guys for a little bit after that. But
no, I watched it in a summer of 90, I think it was 90 or 91, I think it was when I first saw it on YTV here in Canada, and Erica borrowed the books last year and read them, the original books from John Christopher, and you like them? Well,
very much.
Yeah.
Very much. Yeah, that kind of story, that's another sort of escapist, that one is post-apocalyptic, which is right up my street. I love post-apocalyptic stuff. So yeah, I'm really enjoying the Tripods.
So coming from a background of both being classic Doctor Who fans, you could probably appreciate sometimes the ideas rather than necessarily the way it's presented on screen?
Actually, honestly, I enjoy the way that it is presented on screen because I'm a Doctor Who fan. I understand that type of low-budget BBC-style filmmaking. So I kind of like the somewhat janky special effects. And that was my favorite part of watching The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, was I appreciated that, the BBC-ishness of it, even though I didn't particularly like the script or most of the actors, or I'm not a Douglas Adams fan. I'm sorry. I never have been.
It's not for everyone, I guess. But we went to. They did a reunion of the original radio cast. They did a touring version of that. I think they're going to North America at some point as well, if they haven't already been. And that was great fun. And they'd have a guest voice of the book, because the original actor is sadly no longer with us. And
Peter Jones,
Neil Gaiman was one of them, which is pretty cool.
I remember that.
That sounds familiar now that you talk about it.
Yeah, that was great fun, and they had live Foley as well. So you got these guys there doing all the sound effects on stage, which is quite fun.
Oh, no way!
So if you get a chance to check that out,
please tell me Paddy Kingsland was there doing the music as well.
Oh, no, but they had Dirk Maggs. Do you remember Dirk Maggs?
I don't actually know.
He was involved in a lot of BBC radio, a lot of the big stuff, and he was very heavily involved in Hitchhikers on the radio.
Oh, cool.
And he's got a rock band that comes out on stage, and they launch into One of These Days by Pink Floyd.
Right.
Which, of course, has got that slightly little sort of Doctor Who-y bit in the middle of it.
Indeed, yeah.
And that goes down a storm. So, yeah, it's definitely worth checking out if you get a chance to see it. I think they're touring again this year.
Oh, very cool.
So thank you both very much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us. This is lovely.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
And if you want to check out their shows, we've got Radio Free Skaro and The Memory Cheats. We didn't even mention The Memory Cheats.
No, but we talk about that all the time on Blue Box Podcast, it seems. So.
And, of course, the fantastic Verity Podcast.
Yes, thank you.
Do you want to give it a plug, Erica?
Sure, yeah. Verity Podcast is myself and 5 other women from across the globe who all deeply adore Doctor Who, talking about it. We usually have about 4 of us on every week. It's kind of
a rotating cast, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And now that the new series episodes are done, we will be going sort of a proper episode every other week with some extra stuff, kind of filling in the blanks. So every Wednesday you'll get something from us, and it's pretty exciting.
Excellent. Well, thank you both so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure, and tune in again next time for more nerdish meanderings.